Hey everybody, welcome to my first video on switching to Linux Mint that isn't the introduction video. As you can see, I am still in my car, and it's actually the same night that I managed to squeeze in time to make the first one, the introduction. I should say the real first. Hey, whatever. Today we're going to be covering some of the apps I personally use so you can get an idea for the software that's available on Linux Mint. And in the next video, we're probably going to go over how to actually install software. A couple ways to do it, just like in Windows or Mac OS. But those videos are just going to be the apps I use, so you can get a feel for what apps are available, show you generally the use of them, so on and so forth. So now I'm going to switch over to my desktop so you can see everything I do. And for a second, my screen's going to go a little crazy because you're seeing everything, including the screen recorder. Okay, so as far as applications, I use quite a few. In fact, I use a replacement for the equivalent of the start menu. I like it because it's a little bit more simple than the one that comes by default in Linux Mint. I feel like the one that comes by default in Linux Mint is a little complicated. But yeah, this is the menu that I use, and I'm going to show you guys how to install these in future videos. Probably one titled Customizing Linux Mint, or Customizing Linux Mint to look like Pantheon in particular, which is what I'm kind of modeling this after. Now I'm going to go over some of the software that I use here. Linux Mint categorizes software way better than Windows. Like, just by default, the start menu and the start menu replacements definitely categorize things better than Windows. Windows is just an alphabetical list, and it just gets cluttered, just like a cluster of software. So for me, and Linux Mint, it's all categorized by the type of application it is, automatically, which is really, really cool. And a lot of things actually come with Linux Mint, which is really fantastic. One thing that comes with Linux Mint is an office suite called LibreOffice. Now, if you've used LibreOffice in the past, know this. One, it's come a lot farther than you might imagine. Two, however you used it before was probably set up wrong. And I'm going to show you what I mean. So I'm going to pop open LibreOffice Writer. I just wanted to preface this a little bit, and I want to tell you, everything you see is customized by my theming that I've done on my system, and the most prominent of which is the dark theme. Like, everything is dark colored, and I do that intentionally because it's easier on your eyes. And if you use a computer as often as I do, dark themes are like a godsend. They're amazing. Other things like Night Shift, which remove some of the blue light the same way sunglasses do. Speaking of sunglasses, I wonder if... Yeah. So, I'm in my car conveniently, so I have these absolutely enormous sunglasses that go over my normal, and they're my backup for my prescriptions if I forget to bring them or something, and they look ridiculous, but they make me a safer driver. So, ridiculous or not, if you're in my town or my area, you're glad I wear these. I don't know if you can see how this looks right now, but this gives you an idea of what blue blocking screen filters do on your phone and on your computer. Now, Windows 10 and Mac OS and iPhone and Android, they've all added this feature by default, so that's cool. And most Linux distributions, including Linux Mint, I believe, have them by default now too. And they call it night light or night mode or whatever. Dude, I had that way back in the day when I was working doing tech support in the call center, and we really needed it around midnight when our eyes were just, oh my. Anyway, back to LibreOffice. I had to try to stay on target. So I'm going to show you what I mean by, if you've used LibreOffice before and you didn't like it, there's a good chance that it was configured in a way that wasn't actually helpful to you. I'm going to show you why I say that. So I go to it's Tools, Options. The biggest reason people don't like LibreOffice out of the box is down to this setting right here. Load, save, in general. So that's tools, options, and load/save in general. You'll notice right here, document type. For a text document, the thing that's selected automatically is always save as an open document format or ODF text document. And you're thinking, okay, well, what does this have to do with anything? Well, if you work in an office situation, you've tried to use LibreOffice, you know what I'm talking about already. And you might not have even known there was an option. This is an inane default setting. This setting does not make sense for anybody. Like anyone. A significant amount of the world runs on Microsoft Office. And if you're not saving by default and like out of the box, that's what by default means, in a format that Microsoft Office can read, and you start sending files to people and it doesn't work, the average user, the average computer user is going to be like, well, LibreOffice sucks. It's useless. My friends can't open the files, and that's the end of it. It's a done deal. Well, if you dig into the software a little bit, and I don't blame anybody, again, it's an inane default. It should not be the default. As much as people, who are open source purists say, oh, well, we want open standards. Well, you know what another open standard is? Another open standard is, let's see if it's in here. Office Open XML text. And you know what this is? This is the .docx format. And you might be like, well, I've seen that before. Yeah, you have. In Microsoft Office, I think it's 2013 versions and up. Microsoft Office, by default, standardized on this open standard because they were forced to by law. They were effectively a monopoly in keeping people from using other Office suites. So you set this for your default setting, and it says always save as type, blah, 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 at docx. And then we can just go down to spreadsheet and change that again to, let's see, the open documents spreadsheet standard, XLSX. And let's go down to presentation for PowerPoints. I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to do it PPTX. And these are all the same formats that newer versions of Microsoft Office use. So all of a sudden, any documents I make now, any PowerPoints, any Excel spreadsheets are going to be viewable in the Microsoft Office suite. Now, is everything going to be perfect? No. But that's normal for a couple of different reasons. And they're the same problems you'd run into with different people running different versions of Microsoft Office and sending each other files, or if somebody on a Mac has a Microsoft Office software and they send it to their Windows friend with Microsoft Office, the way Microsoft Office pulls in fonts to use in, or any Office suite, if you customize those fonts at all from Times New Roman or Arial or Helvetica New or something like that, if you're using a font other than those and you send somebody a file, or if you send somebody a file that's referencing another file on your computer, it's not going to work. And that's the same thing with LibreOffice and Linux. If you're using non-standard fonts, things might not always come out too well. Now, in favor of LibreOffice, I'm going to tell you something. I have been using alternatives to Microsoft Office since probably about 2002. My family had one copy of Microsoft Office 2000 or something like that, and we used it for a long time on all our computers. And I was there a couple of years. My dad, I wouldn't be surprised if he's still using it to this day. But I know he uses Google Drive. But early on, I realized, we could just use the LibreOffice or OpenOffice, and I dug around in things, and I found you can save in this right format, and it worked fine. 60 or 70% of the time, we didn't do anything too crazy with it. Now, I think, as I mentioned in my other video, the only thing you're going to run into is things other than documents and presentations. So, Word files, PowerPoints, they're going to come across okay. most of the time. You add a ton of content into PowerPoint, it's not going to work good on any computer with any software. It's going to have issues. So I don't recommend those formats, even if you're using Microsoft Office. The only way to make sure that that works is to export them to something that doesn't change no matter what computer it's on, like a PDF. Now, I will say it does work a little bit better in Microsoft Office sometimes, but just as a rule of thumb, and that is the case. However, what you're really going to run into problems with is if you're expecting a one-to-one comparison with Excel or Access. Now, if you use an Excel or Access a lot and you're used to them, you're not really going to find that LibreOffice is up to the task. And it's not all LibreOffice, but some of it is. It's not as powerful. I've heard that from people who actually use Access and Excel that I trust, and they're tech mentors of mine and stuff. So if they say I'm gonna believe them on that. Personally, I'm just a Word and a PowerPoint kind of a guy. Don't really use Excel too much. Oh, now that I think of it, I'm probably gonna end up using Excel more or not Excel, but the LibreOffice equivalent of Excel, which is called Calc. I call it Calc. I'm actually probably going to start using this more because I have been using a different spreadsheet application for some time that I'm trying to move away from because it's Google. But anyway, I used Microsoft Office alternatives for years. The one I ended up leaning towards was the Google Suite, which is Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides. And it was always very easy to use, like stunningly easy, easier than Microsoft Office, and it was free. And Google really got a edge in, just like Apple did in the early days of Apple, with education and academia by offering discounts to education, massive discounts and whatever. And right now Google has done the same thing, and effectively Google runs at least K through 12 effectively, because their laptops, their Chromebooks, that come with these Office suites and are incredibly easy to manage for teachers and sysadmins. They're very cheap, and schools are always struggling for funding. So Google is effectively giving these laptops at like $50 a piece or something. As obviously their build quality isn't that great, but as far as the suite of software available to them, it's perfect for K through 12. And colleges are also switching to Google Suite as well. I have a Google Suite account, and I used it. I was a assistant sysadmin at my college, and we use Google Suite there too. So Google Suite is really coming up in the world, and people are saying, oh, well, there's no room for an alternative like LibreOffice. They're just wrong. LibreOffice is used in a considerable amount of the world without internet access and access to a lot of money economically. And Google Suite is used by probably a good half of the world already. So I'm going to just pause this here. Hey everybody, I had to pause that for a minute because I had to finish up at the store. But I am back, and as you notice, the audio quality and video quality should be significantly better. I am at my home. I've got my laptop in its dock, and I have a bigger screen in front of me, and a better camera, better microphone. Much better microphone. Alrighty. So let's finish this up. So as I was saying, Google Suite is coming up in the world. Alternatives definitely have a place. Just because there's a industry standard doesn't mean it's the best solution. Even if other people expect you to be compatible with it, there's ways of doing it, and usually it's relatively simple at this point. It wasn't a few years ago. Alrighty, so that's it for LibreOffice. As you can see, there's LibreOffice Impress, and there's the PowerPoint alternative. I mean, it's just a really nice suite, and a lot of the hotkeys are going to be the same. A lot of the functionality is going to be the same. It's going to take a little while to get used to the buttons, figuring out where things are. If you were to look up on YouTube, how to use LibreOffice Impress or LibreOffice Writer, You're going to find plenty of tutorials, so I'm not really going to go into that in this series. So as far as other tools that I use go, there's a lot. I mean, you've got music players. I have Amazon Music here. That's not actually an official Amazon app. It's somebody porting it to Linux. But a lot of other of my apps are, like KeePass XC. It's a great password manager that I highly recommend. There's Discord, which is a video chat or normal chat or audio chat application that works incredibly well. And it's highly used by nerds and gamers on all platforms: Android, iOS, Mac OS, Windows, Linux, you name it. It works, pretty much. So, also has Caprine, which is a Facebook Messenger application for Windows, Linux, and Mac. The mail client I use is called MailSpring, and it works, as you would expect a mail client to work. Out of all the mail clients I've used on Linux, I recommend this one the most. It's the most polished. I do wish they would put a little bit more time into developing some more themes for it, because I'm very picky about themes. But, I mean, this works as you would expect a mail client to work. Very, very simple. Not a lot that's super complicated. If you're used to Gmail, you'll be spot on with that, or Outlook. There's lots of little tweaks you can do. Works great. Should work with all of your different email addresses. As far as music goes, they have Rhythmbox. If you actually don't use Rhythmbox, though, I use Amazon Music. In fact, I probably should just pop that right out of the dock there, because I don't use Rhythmbox. Amazon Music works for me. I use Firefox, and you can use Chrome. Google actually has a Chrome browser installable on Linux easily. You can go to google.com/Chrome. You're in. No big deal. It'll say, hey, what kind of Linux are you using? And there's an option there for Ubuntu, which Linux Mint is based off of. You choose that, download, double-click it, install, boom, done. No big deal. I use Firefox because something I might be leaning towards in this series is de-Googling your life a little bit, because I'm trying to de-Google my life. I feel like I've been finding a lot out about Google that I'm not a huge fan of, and they control way too much of information. I even am trying to switch away from Google on Android, which, even though Google develops Android, they aren't the sole developers on the project. It's an open source project, just like Linux is. Android is technically Linux. So you can run it without any Google software whatsoever. And I've started tinkering with that, and I'll probably try to have a video about that in a while. Probably way down the road. But it's easier than it used to be. You can take your Android phone and make it Google free. Relatively easy on recent phones like the Nokia 6-1, Moto G6, and both those phones are like under $300. Easy. Fantastic phones too. So yeah, so using files is pretty familiar. And if you're thinking like, well, what about Spotify? What about that? How do you even install applications? I'm just going to give you a brief introduction. Most applications you're going to install are from the software manager. And there's tons of applications here, like Skype, Steam. As you can see, I have Steam down here. That's a application. It's like an app store for games. Private Internet Access Manager for a VPN advertised by Linus Tech Tips and others. Blender, which is a pro-grade CGI tool. The movie on Netflix, Next Gen, and a couple of other movies you're probably familiar with were made in Blender. That's open source and free. And if I type in Spotify here, there's Spotify, so you install it. You can install it right there. So yeah, I mean, almost all the applications that you use are probably going to be here, and almost definitely alternatives for those applications. So these are generally the applications I use. And here on my dock, GIMP, for instance, is a Photoshop alternative. Not quite as powerful as Photoshop, but a lot of people have switched to it and found it fine. Now, when you get up to pro-grade tools like Photoshop alternatives and video editors like this one, Flowblade, Shotcut, GAMP, you're going to find more of a learning curve, and that's normal. I'm not going to be focusing a ton on that in these series, I don't think. I might a little bit, but there's plenty of other videos on YouTube that specifically go through those at a higher level than I'm capable of. I'm pretty adequate at GIMP, but why would I go through that when other people are better than I am? And there's videos already out there. So yeah, these are the applications I use. I hope you found this video informational. And I'm going to see you in the next video. Actually, no, I'm not done. Wait, don't leave. The last application I recommend is Remarkable. And Remarkable is great. Remarkable is a little tool for making notes. I replaced Google Keep with it. I just synchronized this little text file to my phone with a Dropbox alternative called Nextcloud, but you can install Dropbox on your system if you want to, no problem. And then a video I'm recording right now is in this Notes app, and the next video, choosing a laptop for Linux, is coming up soon. But I really like Remarkable. It's nice, very simple, and you can just do little formatting things. Very simple by just adding characters, and I just like it because you can just keep typing, and that's using Markdown. If you are familiar with that. And that's, again, finally, the apps I generally speaking use. I hope you found this video useful. Stay tuned. Next video is going to be about how to choose a laptop for Linux, and